high school, my friends and I were messing around with a Ouija board at one night. We had done it before and nothing remarkable had ever happened. We usually did it try and scare each other. That night there was no one else home except the 7 of us, and we were all together around the board. One of the girls there wanted to try it. She had never done it before. This time was different. The board misspelled some of the words the same way every time. It gave answers that seemed really historically accurate for our town, things we never knew or cared about. Long story short, the spirit claimed it was a 10-year-old boy who had died on the property in the 80s and was buried there too, in an unmarked grave. My friend's house was on a farm in the edge of the town. We were all a little freaked out because the board had never been so detailed. However, we were still skeptical, and we were all assuming one of us was trying to scare the rest. Finally, my friend asked if the spirit could do something to prove that was there with us. It went to yes, and the spelled out knock. Then the planchette stopped moving. We just all stared at it silently, and then there was a rap on the window right next to us. The lights were on outside, and there was absolutely no one out there. We never touched that fucking board again. So I was closing up the bar one night after a long shift. As I was carrying a rack of glasses into the kitchen, I slipped on wet floor. I just had mopped, fell to the floor. Immediately after, as I'm sitting on the wet floor, I hear a low-pitched moan. It was so audible that I actually thought it was a real person. This was startling considering I was the only person left in the bar. I stood up, completely frozen, and yelled, "Hello?" Again. Immediately I hear the same low-pitched moan, except this time it was louder. Now I'm starting to freak out a little bit, but for whatever reason, I decide to walk closer to where I heard the sound coming from. I yelled very loudly, "Hello?" For the third time, I now hear a very loud moan. That was it for me. I ran back into the kitchen, grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I couldn't find because that seemed logical at that time. Grabbed my purse, ran out the door, and never looked back. It was funny trying to explain to the chef the next day why he was missing a knife during his morning preparations. The creepiest part, I come to find out that there was some sort of accident that had occurred in the restaurant years before with the son of the owner, and word around the town was that he died right there in the bar. When I was a kid, we lived in a haunted house. Strange things happened all the time. For example, my dad and I were alone in the kitchen one day, making a snack. We put a plate on the kitchen counter and walked away to the fridge. We got what we wanted out of the fridge, turned around, walked back to the counter, and the plate flew off the kitchen counter and broke on the floor. My dad tried to calm me by saying the plate must have been blown off the counter. But let's face it, the plate wasn't near the edge of the counter, and there were no windows or doors open. No one else was home. Weird. I also woke up to an old lady standing by my bed. On more than the occasion, I told myself I was dreaming. This part might be dark, but here's the rest of the story. Years later, I looked up the address and found that an old couple lived there for many years right before we moved in. Apparently, the house was broken into and the old woman was raped and murdered. The old man sold the house and moved. We were the first occupants since the incident. We only lived there for about a year. My parents swear me moved so quickly because we got a better deal on another house nearby, but we know it was because the house was haunted and the priest they brought into to bless the place told them we should move. No joke.